Good afternoon and welcome. I'd like to welcome you to the 11th Annual Silver Circle Honors. I'm Steve Novak, President of the Chicago Midwest Chapter. I'm so happy to see so many of you here today. Every year when we do this show, we go out of our way to make sure that the Packers aren't playing at home. This year we went even further. We made sure that the Packers weren't playing at all. And for a lot of you, we made sure that the Brewers, unfortunately, were not playing at all. I'm sorry. Coming from Chicago, I'm really sorry. I wanted the Brewers going. If they were going to beat the Cubs, I wanted them to go all the way. But having said that, we're going to talk about the event at hand. We gathered today to celebrate those who have made significant contributions to Milwaukee and Madison broadcasting for more than a quarter of a century. And we celebrate our colleagues' hard work, many talents, and commitment to excellence. Before we start, I'd like to say that we'd like to send our deepest condolences to the family of Tom Hooper, a 2010 Silver Circle honoree from WITI, who passed away after spending more than 35 years in the business. And our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. Prior to today, 57 local television professionals have been inducted into the Wisconsin Silver Circle. I'm pleased to tell you that we have 20 of these past honorees with us here today. I'd like to ask them to stand and remain standing until every name has been called. And if you can please hold your applause until the end, we won't delay this program. And I will also tell you, I am going to try really hard not to botch the names, but I don't promise anything. James Angeli, Sean Downs, Joyce Garbasiak, Mike Gusha, Daniel Jones, Dennis Kraus, Marianne Lazarski, Tony Lucas, Kathy Michaelby, Dan Needles, Jim Paschke, Ted Perry, Tom Pippins, Renee Raffelli, Gary Reistad, Sally Severson, Tim Van Boren, Ken Wainscott, Joanne Williams, and Jim Wilson. It's now my honor and privilege to introduce today's MC. She's a respected Milwaukee journalist who has worked for a couple of local television stations and in Chicago. She currently hosts Milwaukee Public Television's award-winning Black Nouveau program and is a 2009 Silver Circle honoree. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Joanne Williams.
So thank you very much, Steve. Thank you all for coming today. You know, Steve was very gracious and asked me to help him make sure he got all the names pronounced correctly. However, the ones that were a little shaky, he didn't ask me about. So I thought, you got those. Next year, Steve will go through the whole list. Yes, my name is Joanne Williams. And as we all know, when you're doing television news, you go out on the street and you meet lots of people, and since I don't do day-to-day news anymore, people will come up to me and they'll say, "Oh, you're still at it." And I'll tell them, "Yes, I'm still at it. I'm at PBS now, and I host Black Nouveau." And they will say, or else they'll say, "Oh, I know you. I know you." We've all had this experience. "I know you. Your name is Joyce." And I'll say, "No." They'll say, "Yes, it is. Your name is Joyce." And I'll say, "No, you're thinking of Joyce Garbasiak." Yeah, that's it." I'll say, "No, Joyce is taller and blonde." And they'll say, "Oh, okay." Sometimes if they're really, really insistent, I will just say, "Yes, I'm Joyce," and just keep right on going. Joyce, do you ever get asked if you're me? So that, you know, that brings your ego down to ground level very quickly. and when they still say you're still doing it. So this year, it's full of surprises. This is a year full of surprises for all of us. Who would have believed that we would have just covered the first events and games in a brand new Milwaukee Bucks arena, the Fiserv Forum, and would be looking forward to the demise of the BMO Harris Bradley Center, a building that many of us covered from inception and now construction and soon demolition. Isn't that hard to believe? However, I want to say, and I think you will join me in saying thank you, Lloyd and Jane Bradley Pettit, for what they did for Milwaukee. Yes. Who would have thought we'd be spending so much time talking about midterm elections? And who wants to talk anymore about midterm elections? Let's just get it over with and move on to something else, like the next elections. And personally, I am just happy at all to be here this afternoon, and very grateful that I am. So thank you very much for letting me come and emcee today's program, and I hope you enjoy the show. You're going to hear a lot about sports this afternoon. You've already heard a little bit about it. I had a really good reference in my speech about who'd have thought we'd be covering a World Series. Yeah, who'd have thought it? Never mind. We span different eras in today's program. We have a lineup of honorees from a sports anchor who covered everything from bowling to Vince Lombardi. Another sports anchor more familiar with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. We'll honor a sports photographer who has been an eyewitness to some of Wisconsin's biggest games over the last decades. And we're also honoring an engineering pioneer and a trailblazing photojournalist who's been on the front lines of some of the biggest stories in the state of Wisconsin in the last many years. This year's honorees excelled in this highly competitive business and all-consuming business, and we pause here to thank them for sharing their professionalism and their many talents with us. Today we celebrate their countless achievements and their humanity. When we look at who should get the Silver Circle, we look at what they've done professionally. We also look at what they've done outside of the job. Everybody here has also benefited their community, not just their job. So we say thank you for that. As Steve said, we want to recognize the passing of a 2010 Silver Circle honoree, Tom Hooper, who passed over the weekend, who made a great impact on television news in Milwaukee. To present our next honoree, Hank Stoddard, please welcome 2011 Silver Circle honoree and longtime Milwaukee journalist, Mike Goucher.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be with everybody today. First of all, congratulations to all of the honorees today, all very deserving, wonderful people, great talents. Couldn't be happier for any of them. I too am going to do my very best to make sure that Joanne sees her film. I know there are a few other people who have late afternoon engagements going to the film festival, so I'll also try to be brief, but it's not easy to be brief about Hank Stoddard. I was thinking back to this. 1981 was the year that I walked into the Channel 4 newsroom, and it was kind of intimidating, to be honest. I was 24. I was new in town from Wausau, Wisconsin, and I had a lot to learn. Fortunately for me and for countless other people in that newsroom who were my age, we had incredible teachers to learn from. People like John McCullough and the man that I am honored to introduce today, Hank Stoddard. Or more accurately, Hank Stoddard. There is an interesting story about how Hank Stoddard became Hank Stoddard. I'm not going to share that story. I will let Hank do that. You can do that, Hank. But I guess I just committed the thing that we all hate about television. I did the tease, and I didn't deliver. Anyhow, Hank will deliver, I promise. Thanks. So anyhow, I walk into this newsroom, and there's Hank and McCullough and some of these other folks, and Hank was a larger-than-life figure to me. He was a familiar face at a time where, let's face it, television was in its golden age. The people who worked in television were big celebrities here in their cities. I remember watching Hank for the first time when I was a teenager in high school in Milwaukee in the late 60s and early 70s. Hank was everywhere. You could not avoid Hank. Hank was the lead sportscaster on Channel 4. Hank was the host of Bowling with the Champs. Hank was also the host of a show that some of you may have heard of called The Crown Room Tonight. So The Crown Room Tonight was shot in the upper floor of the Pfister Hotel. Big name entertainers would come to town, and Hank every week would rent a tuxedo and would go there and interview these. That's true, Hank. You rented a tuxedo every week. Got it for nothing. Such a deal. And he would interview the celebrities. They would perform, big name entertainers who would perform. Hank would do an interview with them, and the show would air on Sunday night, The Crown Room Tonight. So Hank was everywhere, and you could understand why he was everywhere. He had a certain style about him. It really translated well to television. And the fact is, Hank started off as a print reporter, but he was meant for television. He was a guy who was smart. You could always tell he was really a sharp guy. He was smooth. He was confident. He had just a little hint of swagger. I mean that in the best way possible, Hank. Not cocky, but always available, accessible. He was funny when you needed to be funny. He was unflappable. In fact, he was so unflappable, he was probably the only person I ever worked with in television who did not use a teleprompter. There it was. We're all dying because, without it, we're helpless too often. Hank was not. Hank didn't need a teleprompter. That's how cool Hank was. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is a lot of us wanted to be like Hank. Given his success, I think you could say that Hank could have been unapproachable. He could have been standoffish, full of himself. We've maybe worked with one or two people like that in our careers. I don't know, maybe. But Hank was none of those things. None of those things. He welcomed us to the station. He made us feel very much a part of the team. You could learn a lot, and a lot of us did, by watching how Hank went about his work. At his core, he is a writer. He was a writer then, he's a writer today. He was a former print reporter. He cared about the words that he wrote, the words that he read every night. They were very important to him. It not only had to be accurate, it had to be clear, concise, punchy. I was talking with Jim Paschke in the back of the room before this began, and Jim said when he came to town, they said to him, Hank, he can really write. That guy can write. Hank interviewed the biggest names in sports. He covered the biggest events in sports, NBA championships, NCAA championships, the sort of the end of the Packers' glory years and that long drought that followed, World Series. He covered the biggest names in sports. But Hank never fawned over athletes or coaches. He knew that we love sports. Sports matter to us. But Hank also knew that professional athletes are people. They are flawed, just like the rest of us. They are not heroes or not idols to be worshipped, and I think his coverage reflected that. He was not afraid to ask hard questions when they needed to be asked. As sports director at Channel 4, Hank was technically the boss, but if you ask the people who work with him, a lot of whom are here today, boss is not the word they would use to describe Hank. They would tell you that Hank was a wonderful colleague, that Hank was a mentor, that Hank was a friend, that he was both encouraging and understanding. And that continued even after Hank retired. I'll tell a quick personal story. 2004, we did a Democratic presidential debate at Marquette University. And I had the chance to moderate that debate, and it was aired on MSNBC. And so I got home from the debate that night, and the first phone call I got was not from my father and not from my sister and not from a family member, which I don't know what that says, but something. But the first call I got was from Hank, telling me, great job, you did well, encouraging me years after he had retired. I will always remember that and appreciate that. And another example of who Hank is and the core of Hank. Many of you in this room know the story about the former Packers great, Lionel Aldridge. He battled mental illness for years. Lionel worked at TMJ for a number of years. Hank was there. Hank was the news director, the sports director, I should say, at the time. Hank saw Lionel in his really good moments, and he saw Lionel in his darkest moments. I personally saw Hank offer support to Lionel, to treat Lionel and his family with patience, with kindness, and with understanding, always with dignity. As many people in this room know, Hank is also a lot of fun. I could probably tell a couple of those stories, but I'm going to let the video, I'm sure the video will tell some of those stories. He has a great sense of humor, very wry sense of humor. Personally, I have wonderfully warm memories of waking up way too early in the morning to play golf with Hank and staying up way too late at night to be at a pool party at Hank's house, which did have some good pool parties over the years, Hank and Ann. You did have some good parties there. So those are great personal memories. They're happy times, fun times. But I think what I have always appreciated most about Hank and what made him so successful in broadcasting is his depth, his curiosity, his intellectual curiosity. He was interested in the world. Hank will tell you he was born in Manitoba in Canada, but he's a guy who could talk American politics and world events with the best of them. He's someone who will maybe surprise you and quote chapter and verse from the Bible. He might even sing you an old gospel song if the mood strikes him. Hank had enormous depth, has enormous depth. And I think that's what made him so successful today. Thoughtful, generous, a mentor, one of the most popular broadcasters of his day. Hank Stoddard is truly deserving of the Silver Circle. Let's look at the video.
You know, when you think of sports legends in Wisconsin, you think of Bart Starr, Brett Favre, Robin Yount, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. When I think of iconic sports broadcasting legends, it's Jim Irwin, Earl Gillespie, and of course, Hank Stoddard. Hank Stoddard, welcome to the Silver Circle.
Can play anywhere from 139 to 200, and what the hell does that say, 16 yards?
Basketball loses its greatest star, Jordan. What the hell else were they going to say?
I was sent out to County Stadium to observe Hank doing a live shot. Of course, he was always great at live shots. But he made just a tiny little error on his 5 o'clock live shot. After the live shot was over, I said, Hank, I think so-and-so is actually pitching. But his reaction was such a great lesson for me. He just laughed. He threw his head back and he laughed and he said, everybody's going to think I'm a bigger idiot than they already think I am. And it was such a strong lesson. He showed me that it's okay to just smile about something and move on, correct it and move on. And that stuck with me all the way throughout my career. Congratulations on your Silver Circle Award.
First thing I remember is a college kid getting a call from Hank Stoddard to come and intern at TMJ. It was like a call from God, and once I got here, I was not disappointed. You're like that duck, paddling like crazy at the bottom, but cool as can be on the outside.
Congratulations, Hank. You're well-deserved. Welcome to the honor roll of journalists.
You were like an older brother to me. You weren't the boss. You were just the greatest friend ever. When I had some work issues, you were there caring, hurting for me again as much as I did. That's what I'll remember you most of all for, Hank Stoddard, and I love you for it. Henry, welcome to the Silver Circle. In reality, you've been a Hall of Famer all your life.
I loved watching how he conducted himself off and on the air, including this internship letter that I still have from when I was UW Oshkosh interning for Hank at Channel 4. I'm sure it was a form letter that he used for hundreds of other interns, but to me, it was a big deal for Hank Stoddard to call me bright and articulate and have a great future in the business. Hank, long overdue. Congratulations and welcome to the Silver Circle.
My first day, I walk in and he says, okay, here's what you need to know. The bathroom's that way, down the hall. The studio is that way, down the hall. You have to put on your own makeup. We don't have makeup people here. And you see the cigarette in my mouth? He says, I'm not supposed to smoke in the building. Nobody is, but I do. I'm your boss. If you don't tell anybody, we're going to get along just fine. Hank was terrific. There was no ego involved with Hank. Hank trusted his people enough to let them do their job. He knew that they would do their job well, and then it was time to go have fun. And he was the best boss I've ever had. Hank, I was honored to work with you for so long. Congratulations on this well-deserved award.
You know, his leadership role at WTMJ as the director of sports, I think that pretty much told you all you needed to know about Hank. You know, he knew what he was talking about. I think that's the bottom line. Once in a while, we'd get some place where we could sit down for a little libation and talk things over. Matter of fact, this is Henry's favorite song from way back then. I know when he sees this, he'll remember this song. It's such a great, it was a big hit at that time, and Hank and I used to sit and listen to this hour after hour after hour. Henry, thinking about you, congratulations on this huge award.
Great reporter, covered you well, and always covered you fairly. He was great. He was really great. You know, I said before that Robin Yount and Christian Yelich on Milwaukee. Hank Stoddard was Milwaukee. He was good. He was really good. And he was always fair, honest. Hank was a real credit to his profession and to this market.
Won't you please welcome Hank Stoddard to the Silver Circle. Hank.
Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. This is a real thrill for me. First of all, I want to thank all and everyone who had anything to do with the event that's taking place and is happening to me today. I'm very appreciative. I'm going to have to, well, first I'm going to tell about the name. Mike mentioned that. As he said, I was born and raised in Canada. There was a guy from WTVO, the NBC affiliate, in Rockford. Apparently, I don't know, was up there fishing or whatever. Saw me do a TV sportscast. Next thing I know, I get a phone call from him, want to come down and audition. I didn't know where the hell Rockford was, but saw I was close to Chicago, thought I could see a couple of ball games, and they were paying for it. Anyway, I ended up taking the job. And now I come down a few weeks later, arrive to start the job. I'm driving from the airport to the TV station, and I see a bunch of big billboards asking, "Who is Hank Stoddard?" I wondered myself. My name was Stothard. I got to the TV station and found out that without consulting with me, they had changed my name for broadcast purposes. You'd never see that happen today. And I didn't think Stoddard was that difficult. Maybe there were some dumb people in Rockford, I don't know. I have a change in plans. I was going to mention some of the people that were here today that I'd worked with and knew over the years. I come here, I look around, there's too damn many of them. I can't do that. So I want to thank all of them that are here today, a lot of former co-workers, a lot of friendly competitors, just a great number of people, and it's just been a pleasure to see you people and renew acquaintances with you. I got to Rockford, as I was telling you, and I'm only on the air maybe, I don't know, a week or 10 days. I get off after the 10 o'clock sportscast, and I get a phone call. Woman says, "May I speak with Hank Stoddard?" I said, "Speaking." She said, "My husband and I just watched you do the 10 o'clock sportscast, and we made a bet, because you have an accent." I said, "Yeah, really?" And she said, well, I made a $25 bet with my husband. I said, you're from Boston. He said, no, he's from Canada. Could you tell us where you're from and settle a bet? And I said, gee, ma'am, I'm sorry, I am from Canada. And she said, oh, you are from Boston. Thank you very much. And hung up the phone. True story. I left Rockford after, well, a little more than a year. I was contacted by WTMJ TV in Milwaukee, and I came and I accepted and spent about 30 years there after that. John McCullough and I started about the same time, within about a week of each other, I think, in 1967, early 1967. I worked with a lot of great co-workers over the years, as I just said, a lot of them here today, and I'm not going to mention them because I'd forget who the hell I've all met today because there have been so many of them. But I was fortunate enough to work alongside some great anchors, sit up there beside them, and wonderful anchors. One of them you just heard from, Mike Goucher, the late John McCullough, Carol Meekins, Mike Jacobs, and some I have probably forgotten. But I remember them, and they were outstanding journalists and simply great pleasure to work with. There's some people I worked with who aren't here today, and I remember them fondly from the sports department: Mike Hegan, Lionel Aldridge, Jim Irwin. Those were three outstanding people, great friends of mine, and they all left this world far too soon, but they are not forgotten. Let me see, what else was I going to talk? I was going to talk about interviews. I enjoyed doing interviews, and over the years, I must have done hundreds of interviews with a lot of famous people, some that weren't so famous, and some stick in my mind that I remember. I remember an interview with Vince Lombardi, the last time I ever saw Vince Lombardi. He had left the Packers and had gone to Washington, accepted the job with the Washington Redskins, and he came back for the annual pro football dinner, which some of you might remember was held annually in the Pfister Hotel in Milwaukee. So I'm there with a photographer, probably Jimmy Angeli, who I want to thank right now for been a great help in providing my bio and putting together the video you just saw, Jimmy Angeli. But anyway, I'm at the Pfister Hotel and waiting for Lombardi to arrive. He arrives and I say, Coach, can I do a short interview with you? And he says, sure. He's all smiles. He sits down. I sit down. And I ask him, first of all, his reception in Washington. And he says, oh, it was absolutely wonderful. They were just great to me. And he's all full of smiles. Then I asked him, how could you justify leaving Green Bay when you had 2 years remaining on your contract and a player would never be allowed to do that? The big smile disappeared very quickly. And he said, players aren't important as coaches or general managers, and this interview is over, mister. And he got up and walked off. Last time I ever saw Vince Lombardi. There are other characters, very special people that I remember. Al McGuire was just something. Al McGuire was a delight to be around. He was just, hard to explain him. He had befriended my father, who came down, and undo my jacket, who came down to visit me, my father, and he's doing Al's run on the lake front, and I go down with a photographer to do an interview with Al. Next thing I knew, Al is in long conversation with my father, who was about 85 or 86, almost a little more older than me now. Anyway, Al and my father developed a great relationship. A year later, I come back. My father's been visiting with me again, and Al's doing some kind of a news conference at the Hyatt Hotel. Anyway, I go there, and Al asked me before we do the interview, how's your dad? And I said, he's sitting outside waiting for me to finish. Hold it. He goes outside, and he sits down with my dad, and they're talking about it. My dad, he wanted to know about my dad being raised poor as dirt in England and all that. He was just a wonderful guy, Al, about lots of different things. After my dad had died at the age of 92, about a month later, I get a phone call. Hank, this is Al McGuire. Somebody told me your father had died. I said, yeah. He says, well, condolences. He said, how old was he? I said, 92. He said, well, he had a great run. I remember that from Al. One other McGuire story. He would have media day every year. The team all gathers and they do interviews. We'd all done our interviews, and now the team is all standing there for a team picture. And the print media is taking all their photographs for the team photo. And I'm standing beside Al. My interviews with him is over. And I look down at the very end of the team picture. There's some small-looking guy there. And I said to Al, God, that kid on the end, hard to believe that he's on a team like this, you know, a major championship college basketball team. Most coaches, if I'd asked that question, would have said, oh, he's got good hands, or he's very fast, or whatever. Al said, not on camera, but Al said, he can't play with a dam. He can't play with a dam, but his old man's a big fundraiser for us in the East. He said, and a good friend of mine, he said, if we're up 20 points in a game or down 20 points near the end, I put him in, and he can always say I played for the Marquette Warriors. What's the matter with that? I said, nothing, Al. Nothing. And other people over the years, Don Nelson I loved interviewing, and God, there were so many. George Bamberger was a delight. Among the players, one I always stick out in my mind is Ray Nitschke. Ray, I got to know him fairly well over the years. I remember one night being sitting in a bar, and some idiot comes up behind Ray and taps him on the back and says, hey, big football player, you don't look so tough. You want to go 10 rounds? I grabbed him and said, I look like I could take you out, man. You want to get killed by taking on Nitschke? And Nitschke was squeezing the bar. His hands were turning white. But he did a lot of Beat the Pro shows with me. You know, we'd take a pro celebrity to a different golf course each week. And one day we're going, I don't know what course it was somewhere halfway between Green Bay and Milwaukee, because it made it easier for Ray to get there. The crew's a bit late. I get there and I'm talking to Ray, and I said, geez, Ray. I said, did you see what happened on the news? O.J. Simpson's wife was murdered. He says, O.J. probably did it. I said, Ray, O.J. supposedly was in Chicago. He said, I don't care, you wait. He'll come out that O.J. did it. He said, I went to so many Hall of Fame dinners with him. I did several commercials with him. That guy was all about himself. He did it. Well, I think it turned out, except for 12 stupid jurors, it turned out that Ray Nitschke knew what he was talking about. You know, there was on that video some scenes of one of them. I was sitting in the grass and throwing up some pieces of grass in here, and I was taking spring training. And they did a lot of shows over the years. Went to the spring training with the Brewers every spring, come back and do a half-hour special. And I particularly remember, because that was the start of that one. And it was called 1972, I guess, and it was called Boomer and a Kid. And Boomer, of course, was George Scott, the power-hitting first baseman at that time for the Brewers. And the kid was Robin Yount, 18 years old, destined to be the starting shortstop for the Brewers, and of course a future Hall of Famer who went on to play for him for many years. Robin was always one of my favorite athletes as well. But one interview, definitely my favorite answer to a question that I asked. This was back several years ago. He's probably still alive, and I remember his name, but in case somebody got to him, I don't want to be told that I was the guy that embarrassed him, but this is a true story. This offensive lineman from the Packers was traded to the Minnesota Vikings, and as fate would have it, the Vikings and Packers were going to play the next Sunday in Milwaukee. Remember, and they played at County Stadium? But this player went up to Minnesota, and badmouthed the Packers in the Twin City media. So then that following few days later, they're going to play that Sunday at County Stadium. I'm there with a photographer, and I look for him. Here he comes. And I ask him what he thought about changing teams, and he says, probably good for me. And I said, up in the Twin Cities, you were quoted as really bad-mouthing the Packers. And his reply was, and this is absolutely the accurate reply, he said, what I said was misconstrued and taken out of concoction. That was my all-time favorite response to a question I ever asked anybody. I played in numerous pro-ams. Of course, when the Pro Golf Tour used to come to Milwaukee, I played in a lot of them. And if you played in the pro-am, you were assigned a caddy. And one year I was assigned this caddy, and I tee off on the first hole, and I hit a slice over into the right rough, and I got a pretty bad lie over there. And I'm thinking I better just try and take an iron and get it out onto the fairway. My caddy says, no, that's not too bad. Take your 3-wood. Are you sure? Yeah, take your 3-wood. I take my 3-wood, and I hit the thing about 20 yards, you know. Now I'm thinking, well, I'm trying to get this over the sand, up over the sand traps onto the green. I better take enough club. I think I'm going to hit a 5-iron. And the kid says, no, you hit a 5-iron, you'll be good. You'll be over the back of the green. Take your 7-iron. So I'm not convinced, but I take my 7-iron. I hit it pretty good. It's short, and it's in the sand trap in front of the green. As I'm in the sand trap, he's always giving me instructions. I finally get out to the back of the green. I 3-putt for about a 7. He tells me it breaks left. I think it breaks right. It breaks right, and he doesn't go in a hole. I'm walking off the green, and I say to this kid, young man, you may be the world's worst caddy. He thought for a moment and said, nah, that would be too much of a coincidence. Think about it. I want to thank whoever the hell was responsible for having me here today. A lot of people. It's been a pleasure coming back to Milwaukee and seeing so many familiar faces. It's just been a joy. The town is booming. My God, I was out here on Friday and Saturday night around the 3rd Ward, and just full of people. It's great to see city I love working in. Didn't enjoy the climate that much, but it's good to be back here and seeing old friends, and I really appreciate the honor bestowed on me today. Thank you very much.